Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're standing in a quiet kitchen where the only light is a low lamp under a row of chipped cups, and steam rises from a kettle like breath on a winter window. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like seeing our little constellation of night owls. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The kettle clicked off and went theatrical, like a soprano taking one last bow. I poured hot water over Jasmine, cupped the mug, and let the cabin's old bones settle. I hadn't planned to sleep here. That changed at dusk. A courier slid an envelope through my slot. Notice to vacate. The paper felt drier than a saltine. The signature belonged to a firm I'd never heard of. My name sat beside quiet enjoyment and forcible detainer, as if I were a trespasser in my own life. 30 days to leave the house where I can find the light switches in the dark. I folded the letter, packed a sweater and a shoebox of photos, and drove 2 curving miles to my grandparents' cabin. If you're arriving now, don't worry, this story runs forward. Night into morning. The cabin sits in a clearing of pines. Leon and Ruta, names to keep their warmth near, built it in a summer of hands. Here I learned to stack wood and to listen. I flipped on the porch light. One step announced itself with a long creak, the sound of a board with opinions. Me too, I told it. Humor doesn't fix a thing, but it oils the hinges. The timing, not the threat, stung. Hours earlier at my grandson Theo's birthday, place cards steered everyone to the long table. Mine waited by the kitchen doorway, printed extra napkins. Serena, my daughter-in-law, laughed like it was harmless theater. I laughed too, because kids deserve cake without salt. After the candles. Serena's smile thinned. We can make this easy. The letter arrived as dusk pinned itself to the eaves. Elder wisdom. When someone values control over connection, step back 2 paces and put your paperwork in order before you put your feelings on display. I wasn't here to sulk. I came to inventory what stays steady. Law, memory, fact. On the shelf above the sink sat a black ledger bound in cracked leather. Ruta used to tap it with a spoon. Every crumb has a path. I thought recipes lived inside. Tonight, the book remembered me. The first pages held dates and weather, light frost on beans. Then stranger entries, columns of numbers, triangles, arrows, names I knew and names I didn't, with words like allotment and shares. A folded envelope slipped out. Taped to an index card lay a brass key, in Ruta's slanted hand, for the room that must stay locked until it doesn't. Sidebar. Odd fact. Mussels glue themselves to wet rock with a protein called dopa, lacking muscle goo. My grandmother used clear tape and stubbornness, which, across decades, works surprisingly well. I weighed the key. A locked room can be a door, a drawer, or a silence that's been overfed. The cabin's short hall ends at a door I've never seen open, as a child. When I asked, Ruta patted the frame for later. I walked down the hall and stopped. Midnight is brave but not wise. Tomorrow. I told the door. Doors vote by saying nothing. I slipped the key into my coat pocket. Its small weight pulled me toward morning. Back in the kitchen, the tea had cooled. Universal cue for a refill. I warmed it on the stove because the microwave hums like a hornet. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from unknown and a text. We can make this easy. Easy is persuasive the way a slick salesman is, briefly and expensively. I answered the empty room. I already own a broom, and set the phone face down. Small jokes are life jackets. They keep your chin up to reach the shore. Academic phrase of the day. procedural justice, the public argument that people accept outcomes, even unfavorable ones, when the process is fair, transparent, and respectful. Remember it. I suspect Serena forgot when she attached a lawyer's letter to my mailbox instead of speaking to me first. I made a pencil plan. Tomorrow, I'll call the county clerk, copy the letter, and photograph the envelope. I'll pull property records I haven't checked since my son married, and I let paperwork nap. I'll see which lock this brass key prefers. Daylight is good at shooing panic, and I like my witnesses in the sun. The ledger listed seed stock with initials, arrows to co-op. Names formed roads through the community, a retired teacher, a bait man by the river, the midwife who salted tomatoes year-round. If this ledger is a recipe, the dish is leverage. Joke count. If you're keeping score, the kettle's retirement aria, the Hornet microwave, and my broom comeback. My grandfather said humor is a crowbar for stuck doors. He was right. Also, make sure it's not the pantry. You'll only free biscuits. I pulled a loose leaf and made 2 headings. Notice to vacate, with its phrases, marital claims, detainer, 30 days. Beneath it, notice to remain, with mine, verify, chain of title. Document communications, no signatures under duress. Writing steadied the room. I stood on the porch. Pines lifted into the dark. Stars crowded the sky like relatives, loud, beautiful. I held the key and the ledger. Fair, I told the trees. Not easy, fair. Process before outcome, sunlight before signatures. I can't fix a year of slights overnight, but I can decide what I won't do. I won't sign anything tomorrow. I won't argue in the comments of my own life. I won't mistake being loud for being brave. Inside, I rinsed the cup and set it to dry. The bed waited. Cold. The quilt smelled of old soap and summer. I slipped the ledger into my bag and the key into my pocket. The cabin exhaled. I lay, listening to wood adjust and wine test seams. There is a room that must stay locked until it doesn't. There is a letter that wants me gone. There is a path braided from facts, patience, and a grandmother's tidy hand. Tomorrow, I'll take the first step. Tonight, I'll rest with the plan, beginning not with thunder, but with a kettle, a pencil, and a key. Morning arrived like a quiet vote of confidence. The pines wore a thin gauze of fog, and the cabin's windows breathed a little. I set water to boil and opened the ledger where I'd left a paperclip. The numbers waited, tidy, pointed, not interested in being charming. Triangles, arrows, initials, a series of 3-letter clusters in the margin, BRN, SIL, GLD, repeated beside dates that hugged late summers and dry falls. It looked less like accounting and more like a map that forgot to draw itself. I pulled open the cutlery drawer to find a pencil sharpener and nearly dislodged the whole thing. The back snagged, the drawer stuck. I tugged. Dust sighed out in a dramatic cloud, as if the cabin had been saving it for a scandal. Pushing aside rubber bands and a heroic number of twist ties, I felt metal against wood. I slid my fingers under the drawer's lip and peeled loose a strip of brittle tape. A brass tag came free, oval, stamped with 1129. The same slanted hand that labeled the ledger had scratched on its back, water before wheat. I set the tag beside the brass key from last night. They weren't a pair by shape, but they agreed by attitude, plain and patient. The kettle hissed. I poured over coffee grounds in a chipped mug Ruta used for measuring pancake flour. Coffee at the cabin tastes like the color of the table, and I needed the table's steadiness in a cup. On the ledger's inside cover, a legend revealed itself in pencil so faint I almost missed it. Triangles for wells or standpipes, circles for cisterns, arrows for valves, stars for hydrants. Then those 3-letter clusters again, BRN, SIL, GLD, each followed by numbers and a fraction. I turned a page and saw a column labeled shares. Another minutes, another diversions. Shares I understood from the co-op. Minutes sounded like time. But in irrigation, minutes are something else. Allocations of flow. Slices of pressure. Academic phrase of the day: prior appropriation. The public argument that in many Western and semi-arid regions, whoever first put water to beneficial use holds priority over later users. So, first in time, first in right, can trump land deeds and polite wishes, if that's what this ledger tracks. Then the story isn't just about a house. It's about the river you can't see from the porch, but that still decides whether gardens live. Leon's handwriting took over 3 pages in neat blocks. Sill, 8 shares, 40 minutos. At head gate 3, keep meter honest. Routes to gates. I could picture, if I closed my eyes, a ditch along the meadow fence, a rusted wheel half buried, a length of pipe idling under salal. The initials matched neighbors I remembered from childhood potlucks. BRN could be Benji Rowan, who baked bread that cracked like shale. GLD, maybe the Garlands, who put marigolds in everything like yellow punctuation. I took the brass tag, the key, and the ledger down the hall to the locked door I'd promised to let live until morning. Promises are medicine. You take them as prescribed. The door's paint was the particular cream of old refrigerators. The key slid in, paused, then accepted the day. The lock turned with a sound like clearing a throat. I eased the door open. Cool air leaned out. The room was more pantry than vault. Shelves, a drafting table, a corkboard crowded with twine and thumbtacks. On the far wall, a paper map the size of a bedsheet was pinned in perfect grid. The map was the valley, a patient sketch of fields, irrigation ditches, culverts, and elevation lines that curved like knuckles. The symbols matched the ledger's legend. Along the river, a row of numbered ovals hung from thumbtacks. One was 1129. I lifted the brass tag and held it to the map. It fit over the printed oval like a locket's face. Someone, probably Ruta, had made little cloth pockets beside each oval, each pocket holding a thin card with notes, hours, valves, a neighbor's name, a season. Inside 1129's pocket, a card read, Meter 3A replaced 1999, handle stiff, oil, pressure check each May, shares held in trust, Ruta plus Leon, Mira, on record. My name sat there calmly, written in that no-nonsense hand. A laugh escaped me, short and surprised. My name, not as decoration but as assignment. Serena's "We can make this easy" had skipped a chapter. You don't eject the person whose name is on the gate. Not if the pipes remember better than the people do. Elder wisdom. If you don't write your intentions where the living systems can carry them, on deeds, in co-op roles, in the patterns of work, then grief and greed will try to write them for you. Put your love in ink that outlasts a mood. On the drafting table lay a shallow box with packets of seeds in waxed envelopes, each stamped with a year and a variety. Some names were old friends, Blue Lake pole beans, Brandywine tomatoes. Others sounded like folk songs, Moon and Stars watermelon, Dragon tongue bush beans. A small jar labeled Rutabaga, Ruta's bag, made me snort. Light joke number 1. My grandmother was incapable of resisting a pun. Consider it a genetic condition we carry like freckles. Sidebar. Odd fact, properly dried and stored in cool, dark conditions. Some seeds remain viable for astonishing spans. A date palm seed excavated at Masada germinated after roughly 2,000 years. We aren't growing castles here. But the idea that sleep can last centuries and still wake up green never fails to reorganize my sense of time. The corkboard held Polaroids of culverts after storms, notes on who mended which fence, receipts for pipe lengths. A photo of me at 12 stood out, knees dirt-streaked, holding a sieve while Ruta rinsed collards in a galvanized tub. She had written on the white border, "Mira, keeps time." She meant I kept rhythm with chores, but now it read like a nudge, "Keep time in the legal sense." 2. File before deadlines, clock minutes at the head gate. Show up when the valves open. I took a slow inventory. The co-op share certificates lay inside a folder, bearer shares with endorsement lines neatly filled, dates notarized. Leon's witness was the town clerk, and the stamp was clean. There were copies, bless them, initialed in green pencil and tucked in a second envelope labeled, "If you need to prove a thing twice." Light joke number 2. The town clerk had an affection for green ink and told every wedding couple, "It's not official until it looks like a frog sat on it." Bureaucracy with a sense of amphibian flourish. Who am I to argue? I photographed everything. Angles, dates, stamps. I made a list for the county, pulled the parcel history, co-op bylaws, water adjudication records, change of beneficiary forms. Then I wrote in my notebook, "Do not meet alone. No signatures in restaurants. Keep the door open. Keep the recorder visible. Process is not drama. It is scaffolding. Drama burns down. Scaffolding builds and holds." By late morning, the fog had wrung itself out and the pines looked newly combed. I stepped outside to breathe. Across the fence, Maribel, the retired judge who lives with 3 orange cats and an opinion on every municipal budget, waved from her porch. I lifted the ledger. She raised her coffee in reply. A neighborly vow of future conversation. Allies are sometimes a front porch distance away, waiting for you to ask. Back inside, I traced the ditch route for 1129 with my finger and practiced the names of valves out loud so I wouldn't fumble them later. Words have a way of making your back straighten when you say them right. Once, twice, 3 times. Headgate 3, meter 3A, valve east of the willow. My phone lit up again. Unknown. I let it go to voicemail. The 4th call came with a text. "Please call. Misunderstanding." Light joke number 3, strictly for my own nerves. I briefly considered replying with a photo of the dictionary open to misunderstanding, but dictionaries are for study, not combat. And anyway, I had a date with a copy machine. Before I closed the locked room, I slipped the brass tag back into its pocket and the key onto a nail on the inside frame, reachable, not flaunted. The door clicked, not final, just faithful. On the way out, I caught my reflection in the window, hair in a practical knot. Coffee halo in hand, I looked like someone who could hold a line without raising her voice. That felt new, and also exactly like Leon would have expected. The plan. Then, take the ledger and copies to Maribel for a sanity check. Drive to the clerk's office. Record what can be recorded. Put Serena's letter in its proper folder. Schedule a conversation only in daylight. Only with witnesses. And only after the co-op's roll has my name spelled the way water spells it. By where it goes. By who opens the gate. I washed my mug, set it on the rack, and wrote the day's list on a sticky note that looked like a lemon. The cabin hummed with the small applause of appliances. Clouds thinned. Somewhere a woodpecker auditioned for a job as a metronome. I took that as my cue to move. I met Serena at noon because sunshine behaves like a second witness. She chose a cafe with velvet chairs and a mural of lemons pretending to be suns. The air smelled like milk foam and decisions. I set my phone on the table with the recorder icon politely visible. No sneaking, just clarity. Serena smiled the way a cat does when it has something under the rug. "We just want to clear the air," she said, sliding a manila folder toward me. The folder had the brittle confidence of paper that had rehearsed. Inside sat a family settlement agreement, a quitclaim deed, and a letter on firm stationery that favored italics. A name in the header, Kessler and Wren, boggled at me from elegant font. I recognized the signature from the envelope shoved through my door. Someone had dressed coercion in serif type. A man at the next table lifted a latte art leaf to his lips. Another man stood from the corner bench and joined us without asking if the chairs minded. Trent Wren, he introduced, extending a hand that felt like a receipt, official, and somehow already spent. Mediator, if that helps. He was not a court-appointed anything, just the firm's polite face. I shook his hand, because my grandparents raised me on neighborly reflexes, then put both hands back around my mug to reheat my composure. We thought we could keep this friendly, Serena said, opening a pen that clicked like a metronome. No need to drag the county into it. The pen waited beside the signature lines like a small, eager animal. Elder wisdom. If someone insists you sign right now to keep it friendly, you're standing at the edge of a cliff disguised as a picnic. Move the blanket back before you sit down. I smiled at the papers with the same expression I use for toddlers, offering you a plastic sandwich. I'll read, I said, because that's what friendly deserves. I began with the deed. It offered to transfer any and all interest in my home and related appurtenances in exchange for the promise that familial harmony shall be pursued in good faith. Harmony as currency. My eyebrows went up all by themselves. Why don't you just sign the agreement first? Serena suggested, drumming a nervous rhythm. Her phone, face up, blinked on the lock screen. I saw a recent call list. Kessler and Wren appeared 3 times this morning, once labeled 802, Quick Q. Quick Q is a cousin of We Can Make This Easy. Both arrive with a bill. Academic phrase of the day. Undue influence. The public argument that consent isn't genuinely free where there's a relationship of trust or dependence combined with pressure. Manipulation or imbalance of power. The law knows that a signature obtained under a smile and a threat is not a blessing, it's a bruise in cursive. I read aloud small sections, softly, the way you read recipes when you care if the cake rises. Trent's smile held steady, Serena's drifted. The agreement required me to vacate within 10 days, disclaim any claim to water and improvements, and refrain from contacting minors with allegations adverse to family unity. I sipped water. This forbids me from telling my grandson I love him if you decide love is adverse, I said, and let the sentence fall onto the table. Trent dabbed at his tie. Of course, that's not the intent. These are placeholders. Then we can remove them, I said. Words don't need to camp where they aren't welcome. He offered a smaller stack. Here are signature pages so we can move forward while we work out language. I turned the pages. The signature lines were dated today. The body of the agreement bore a last revision date 2 weeks ago. The day after Theo's party where my place card said, extra napkins. Tidiness has a scent. This smelled like bleach. Light joke number 1. I asked for a glass of tap water. For ceremony. Explaining that where I come from. People don't sign important things without inviting the nearest municipal infrastructure to witness. The server laughed and brought me a mason jar. My private grin. The city had more oversight today than the people across from me. May I keep a set of these to review with the county clerk? I asked, already sliding the top copy to the edge of my folder. Trent hesitated, then nodded. Of course. His of course sounded like he'd meant to say unfortunately, but remembered he was performing cordiality. Sidebar, odd fact. Many modern color printers and copiers add barely visible yellow microdots to every page, encoding the device's serial number and the time of printing. Documents sometimes carry their own return address, like a ghost you can only see under a blue light. Paper wants to be honest if you let it. Serena leaned in. Mira, we can draft an allowance for you out of respect, a stipend. But this, she touched the deed. This is what Dad would have wanted. The sentence arrived in the costume of kindness and left a draft. I folded my hands. I'm keeping my promises this week, I said. No signatures in restaurants, No meetings without witnesses, no decisions made before noon without walking the ditch line. That last promise was new, but it felt as old as gravel. You'll get a written response after the clerk stamps my copies. Trent's phone vibrated. He flicked it to silent and placed its screen down, but not before I saw the firm name again. We're just trying to avoid the escalation of fees, he murmured, as if money were immoral. I nodded. Same, I said. We'll let the daylight keep us honest. Light joke number 2. I asked for a to-go box for the unsigned pen so it could travel home safely. The server grinned and brought me a cardboard clamshell. I placed the pen inside like a rare shell and slid it back across the table. I don't have room in the fridge, I apologized. We sat for a quiet minute, milk frother sighing, a spoon making gentle announcements in a cup. I gathered my copies. I'll email you my questions, I said, standing calmly so my bones remembered the motion. And I'll CC the clerk, so there's a thread. Please don't involve outsiders, Serena said quickly. This is family. I tucked the folder under my arm. Then let's behave like family, I replied, and let my smile do the rest of the sentence. At the counter, I paid for all 3 coffees before they could object. Receipts are small poems that rhyme with timeline. I stepped out into noon's clean hand on the sidewalk. The town clock struck 12 with a tone deep as a bell jar. I walked 2 blocks to the clerk's office, where fans spun like thoughtful daisies. The clerk, Miss Lark, wore green ink in her pocket and reading glasses on a chain that could have pulled a small boat. She glanced at the header. Ah, the wren flock, she murmured. Stamping my copies received with today's date. Would you like a certified copy of your certified copy? Light joke number 3, I said. Only if it comes with a commemorative frog. And she solemnly pressed a frog-shaped paperclip onto the corner. We added the notice to vacate to the packet, photographed the envelope's barcode, and logged my request for parcel history and the current co-op role. Your name, she said, running a finger down the screen, appears on the trust documents related to water shares. Last recorded change was recorded by your grandparents when the millennium still felt like science fiction. She printed the page and slid it over like bread. I thanked her and stepped into the heat again, on Main Street. Maribel sat on a bench with an orange cat draped across her lap like satin. She patted the space beside her. Well, she asked. I gave her the boiled-down version, café, pen in a box, copies stamped. She nodded slowly. Pressure without cause looks tidy until it has to speak in daylight, she said. Bring me the packet tonight. I'll mark the soft spots. We watched the crosswalk for a minute. Cars yielded. A child in a red hat pulled his mother toward the ice cream window. Ordinary life kept beating time. I thought of the 11:29 tag tucked in its pocket and of a map that fit exactly where it hung. That kind of fit is not magic, it is labor remembered. At home. The cabin held the soft cool of closed curtains. I laid the stamped copies on the table, grid straight, and wrote a list in the margin. Ask about the miner's clause. Strike appurtenances that smuggled in water. Propose mediation only at the courthouse annex with an actual mediator, not a firm's hand puppet. The recorder on my phone held the cafe's soundtrack like a seashell holds the shore. I labeled the file and backed it up twice. I looked at the pen groove worn into the table where Leon once balanced his checkbook. He'd keep time, I thought. So will I. Tomorrow, the co-op office. The ditch line at dusk. The sound a valve makes when it decides to turn. The co-op office kept hours like a sleepy cat, open, but only if you knew how to knock. I went there in the late afternoon when the heat slid off the tin roof in waves. The building used to be a feed store. It still smelled faintly of molasses and twine. A bell on the door announced me with a sound like a jar lid loosening, behind the counter. A cork map showed the valley stitched with blue yarn. Each pin wore a tiny tag, numbers instead of names. The co-op's way of keeping a memory without taking sides. "Afternoon," said the manager. A woman with paper cutter shoulders and a nameplate that read, "Nix." She had the exact posture of someone who has wrestled a jammed photocopier and won. I placed my stamped copies on the counter, arranged like placemats. The frog paperclip smiled up at us, amphibiously official. "I need current rolls," I said softly. "And I'd like to verify minutes and shares associated with meter 3A, headgate 3. Miss Nix checked a ledger the size of a breadboard. Her finger landed where I expected. "Ruta and Leon. Transfer to Mira. Confirmed. Minutes? 40 at 3A. Contingent on seasonal flow. Assessments current." She glanced up. "You keeping time?" "As if Leon were late and I had his watch," I said. That earned the smallest grin, a paper cut of approval. Back at the cabin. Dusk settled in like a well-mannered guest. I took the ledger to the locked room and studied the big valley map until the lines felt like handwriting I could imitate. The 1129 tag gleamed modestly in its pocket, still. Something in me vibrated with unfinished business. A string you can't stop hearing. The floorboards under the drafting table were slightly darker where a rug had lived for years. I moved the table gently, respecting both wood and ghosts, and knelt. One board carried a set of tiny drilled dots in the shape of a square, nearly invisible unless the light came flat across it. I slid a palette knife along the seam and felt the catch of a hidden latch. The square rose like a held breath. Below, a shallow box, tin, felt-lined, weighted with the patience of the tucked away. Inside lay a roll of tracing paper, a bundle of envelopes tied with kitchen string, and a little wood-handled stamp. The envelopes held bearer share certificates, duplicates of the ones on the shelf, but older, with elegant script and a watermark of wheat. Each endorsement line had been filled. Witness stamped by Miss Lark in her green, frog-blessed era, and then notarized again 3 years later. Belt, suspenders, and a good tailor. Light joke number 1. My grandparents packed paperwork like picnickers who expect rain. Bears. And a surprise cello concert. Redundancy with flair. The tracing paper unfurled into a translucent sheet laid over the valley map. On it, Ruta had drawn a new system. Secondary ditches sketched like fine veins, with notations in tidy print. Borrowed minutes. Maribel, 5. Ruta, 5. Garland, 5. Return, 5. A choreography of flow. At the corner, a sentence. If pressure drops below 12 psi, open east valve at Willow, but count to 60 before you decide you're right. A grandmother's voice. Practical, slightly teasing. Allergic to panic. Sidebar. Odd fact, older rural water systems sometimes use sandset wood flumes and clay tiles that hum at certain pressures. People swear they can tell the flow by ear when the pipe sings B flat. It sounds fanciful until you stand on a ditch bank at dusk and hear the ground make music. I followed the tracing lines with my finger and felt a quiver of outrage give way to something steadier. Serena's papers wanted the land as a stage. These maps remembered the land as a conversation. There's a difference between owning a field and knowing where the water likes to pause. The small, wood-handled stamp in the box bore a word. Received. It was the old co-op stamp, retired and rescued. I pressed it lightly to my palm. The faintest received ghosted in red. Evidence is comfort. Even my hand felt filed. Academic phrase of the day. Easement appurtenant. The public argument that certain rights travel with a parcel of land, like the right to run water through a ditch across a neighbor's field, and pass to future owners even if everyone forgets to say grace out loud. In farm country. The ditch is not trespass. It's a sentence the land has been reading for 100 years. I copied what mattered, took photos with timestamps that quietly hummed truth, and closed the floor box. The square settled flush. Seem a whisper. I left the map unrolled. a bedsheet of intention across the table. Outside, twilight spread the kind of violet pastry chefs envy. I walked the ditch line because paper is convincing, but water is decisive. Past the willow. The air cooled as if the ground kept a secret fridge. Crickets tuned themselves into a soft motel choir. At Headgate 3, steel weighted with oily calm. I tested the handle, stiff. As the note predicted, I counted to 60, because obedience to a note is a kind of respect, and turned. Water pushed through with the soft shush of someone smoothing a bedspread. Elder wisdom. Don't confuse speed with courage. Most gates open better if you give the metal a minute to remember it's a tool and not a doorstop. When I got back, an envelope sat on the porch like a well-dressed raccoon, the return address, Kessler and Wren, inside. A courtesy copy of a revised agreement, with the minor's clause softened to communication consistent with co-parenting goals. Nice try. The deed still smuggled in appurtenances, like a thief in a choir robe. I placed it under a paperweight shaped like a potato, Leon's joke gift from a feed store raffle, and wrote a note. Proposed courthouse mediation with neutral, assigned by judge. All drafts to be redlined in track changes. No pen theater. Light joke number 2. I briefly considered sending them a self-addressed stamped envelope for their conscience, in case it wanted to come home. I called Maribel. She answered with a judicial, I summarized. Floor box, tracing paper, stamp, ditch walkthrough. She hummed a bar that might have been approval or a tune from her cat's opinion. Bring me the tracing sheet, she said. If they claim ignorance of the easements, we'll teach a short class. We set a time for morning on her porch, where cats perform the ancient rite of being excellent. I washed my hands and watched the day's dirt ribbon down the drain. The cabin's clock, the one with a painted trout for a pendulum, kept honest time. I made a sandwich that would not impress anyone on television and ate it gratefully. Before bed, I opened the ledger to a page where Leon had written in his print so square you could stack boxes on it. When tired, do the next precise thing, not the big thing, the next precise thing. I listed 3. Draft email proposing proper mediation, request certified co-op roll with easements attached, oil headgate handle and log pressure. Then, because I am still human and not a clipboard, I added a 4th. Sit under stars for 7 minutes, no agenda. Outside. The sky did what skies do when no one is selling tickets. I thought of Theo, my grandson, and the way he counts sparkler pops on his birthday like they're drums. I thought of Serena's smile, the way it sits like a ribbon on a box that contains paperwork, not cake. I thought of water agreements signed by hands now dust, hands that would be deeply unimpressed by a pen clicking in a cafe. Light joke number 3. A moth visited my porch lamp and performed several convincing arguments for why it should be the new town clerk. Excellent use of circles, poor instinct for glass. Back inside. I placed the wood-handled received stamp by the ledger like a small totem of bureaucracy that happens to be kind. I set the potato paperweight over the courtesy copy. The map waited in the other room, a country spread out on paper, willing to teach anyone with enough patience to trace the lines. I folded down the quilt. The bed released a cool sigh. Somewhere a valve thunked deeper in the system, the sound of a metal thought completing itself. It felt like the valley putting a hand on the wheel with me. Tomorrow, Maribel's porch. Then the courthouse annex where walls are dull and papers sound louder when they say what they mean. The work ahead is not glamorous, but it is granular, like sand that finds every crack and, with time, reshapes stone. Tonight, we rest with the floor box closed, the map open, the water singing its practical little song through the ditch beyond the willow. Not rushed, just right on time. Maribel's porch was already awake when I arrived. 3 orange cats arranged like commas in a sentence that wasn't finished. A pitcher of lemonade sweating a polite halo on the table. She wore a denim shirt and the patience of someone who has heard every kind of story and still believes in paragraphs that end with sense. I laid the tracing sheet over her table. Bubbles in the old glass made the map look slightly underwater. She read quietly, lips moving a fraction, as if the valley were reciting itself. "Good bones," she said at last, tapping the route from Headgate 3 to the Willow. "Good paper. Better habits." She slid my stamped copies beside the map. "Now, we built the scaffolding around your facts so nobody can pretend they didn't see them." Her pencil lived behind her ear like it paid rent. She drew a simple timeline in the margin. Party. Extra napkins. Notice to vacate. Cafe ambush. Clerk stamps. Co-op confirmation. Ditch walkthrough. "Documents love chronology," she said, "and courts love when the story stands up by itself." She underlined daylight only. "We keep that. No meetings after 4. The sun is our bailiff." Elder wisdom. When fear wants you to sprint, walk instead with a list and a friend. Panic breaks things, pacing preserves them. We composed a letter on her porch, point by point. "Dear Mr. Wren," it began, because cordial letters are easier to hold steady in the wind. We proposed mediation at the courthouse annex with a roster assigned neutral. We requested that all drafts be exchanged in track changes, not as glossy PDFs that looked like decor. We objected to appurtenances, swallowing water rights, to vague clauses that could strangle plain affection, and to any meeting not documented and witnessed. "Add this," Maribel murmured, writing with the gentle authority of a metronome. "You will deliver all communications by email and certified mail. We will do the same. Service by whisper and smile will not be recognized." Light joke number 1. I asked whether smoke signals needed a carve-out. She raised an eyebrow that could have cross-examined a cloud. "Only if your opponent can prove Morse code in barbecue," she said. And the cats thumped their tails as if that were precedent. She looked at my phone. "Set a naming scheme for your files. YYYMMDD. Brief tag. 1 verb. Treat your folder like a tidy kitchen." We drafted an affidavit, simple, factual, notarizable, stating the existence of the ledger, the floor box, the tracing sheet, and the co-op role, plus the steps I'd taken since receiving the notice. "Affidavits are like gentle animals," she said. "Feed them facts. Don't dress them in adjectives." Academic phrase of the day, chain of custody, the public argument that evidence keeps its integrity only if every handoff is documented, time-stamped, and accountable. Today, we extend that idea to humble things. Photos of stamps, audio of conversations, the path from ditch to desk so nobody can say the truth got mislaid between pockets. We rehearsed a daylight protocol. I do not meet alone. I announce when I hit record. I carry copies stamped and signed. If a conversation wanders, I bring it back with, "For clarity, I'll summarize by email this afternoon." It felt stiff when said out loud. It felt like a life jacket when imagined at a table with a pen trembling in front of me. Sidebar. Odd fact. A cat's purr commonly vibrates between 25 and 150 hertz, the same range some physical therapists use to encourage bone and tissue healing. Maribel's oldest Tom, who purrs like a tiny lawnmower, parked on my shins while we typed, if my courage had a frequency. I think it matched his. We walked to the clerk's office together, 2 blocks of summer sidewalks and a breeze that edited the heat to tolerable. Miss Lark greeted us with her frog green ink. As ceremonious as a band in a small-town parade. We notarized my affidavit. We made certified copies of the tracing sheet and the map legend. Each copy earned a neat stamp that sounded like a rubber raindrop. Miss Lark produced a form titled Request for Facilitated Mediation Assignment, the way magicians produce scarves. This keeps the process clean, she said, aligning pages with the spine of her hand. Clean processes don't guarantee a clean heart on the other side, but they give you somewhere to stand. Light joke number 2, the office printer chewed the first envelope and spit it out like a critic. Miss Lark patted its lid and promised it a snack if it behaved. It went quiet, possibly reconsidering its career. We assembled the packet for Kessler and Wren, cover letter, affidavit, certified copies, co-op roll excerpt with my name warm on the page, and the proposal for a courthouse mediator. I wrote the addresses carefully, choosing legible over pretty. My handwriting has always looked like someone who learned penmanship from grocery lists. Today, that felt right. Send one by certified mail with return receipt, Maribel said, sliding me the green card like a playing piece. Scan the receipt, photograph the envelope at the counter. Ask the clerk to initial the margin of your letter so it bears 2 truths, theirs and ours. At the post office, the air smelled like tape and calendars. The clerk affixed labels with the careful press of someone wrapping breakable news. "Do you want signature required?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and that small word felt like armor, cool and precise. I took the counter photo, the address sharp, the green card bright, the timestamp a little flag. Chain of custody for a rectangle of hope. Back at the cabin, we staged the table for the next wave, a 3-ring binder with tabs, timeline, co-op, property, correspondence, audio, photos. Each section got an index page with dates and the shortest possible verbs. We printed the email we just sent. We clipped the postal receipt. We laid the potato paperweight on the thickest stack. The received stamp sat by my elbow like a polite terrier. I called Theo to ask about his day, careful to keep my voice like water over stones. Gentle, steady, unconcerned with banks. We talked about a lopsided Lego tower he'd made. He asked if my cabin had frogs. "One," I said, tapping the corner of a document where the little green clip grinned. "It's in charge of the paper." He laughed. The full-throated kind that builds new rooms inside your ribs. Evening slid toward us with that lake surface calm. I checked the ditch again to oil the headgate handle. 1, 2, 3 turns of the can. The good kind that smells faintly of citrus and factories. The metal seemed to remember its job faster. I logged the pressure, wrote the time. Paper loves ink the way the body loves salt. Maribel called after dinner. "Read me the cover letter," she said. I did. She hummed approval, then added, "Last paragraph. 2 sentences, not 4. Let them feel the weight of fewer words." I trimmed them. The letter breathed better. We talked about the settlement's likely next move. Cosmetic tweaks. Perhaps a sudden generosity that came with a hook, or a threat dressed as a reminder. "They're used to people hurrying because they're tired," she said. "You'll be tired. Still, we do not hurry." Light joke number 3. I told her I'd set a kettle reminder labeled "Do Not Boil Decisions." And she said every courthouse should issue that magnet with the marriage license. Night gathered gently. I filed the day where it belonged. I named the audio with today's date. I tucked the green card stub in the binder and wrote myself a note. When the return receipt arrives, photograph, scan, file, place under potato. I'm learning that part of courage is making little promises to your future self and then keeping them like vows. Before bed, I walked out to the porch with the ledger. The trees stood like patient bailiffs. Somewhere down the line, water negotiated corners and came to terms with gravity. I thought of Serena's smile, the way it presses on a conclusion as if pressure could make it true. I thought of the map, of valves, of shares that had been counted with honest minutes. I thought of the word received, stamped faintly on my palm, still visible if you tilted it to the lamp. Tomorrow, wait for the firm's reply. Schedule time at the courthouse annex. Bring cookies to Miss Lark because gratitude is also part of the chain of custody. Make copies of the copies because paper has a sense of humor. The work is not glamorous. It is granular, pebble by pebble. We are building a shore to stand on while the tide argues with itself. I turned off the porch light. The cats across the fence sang their low electric hymn. Inside. The binder's tabs shone like small flags on a map I hadn't planned to draw, but now could read. I agreed to a reconciliation dinner on one condition. We meet while the sun is still working. So I chose the earliest possible hour that still lets a restaurant count it as dinner, 4 o'clock. Sunlight flung across the windows like clean linen. I arrived 20 minutes early, placed my phone on the table with the recorder icon openly glowing, and set out a single folded card that read in tidy block letters, recording for accuracy. No sneaking, just daylight in pocket form. They came in waves. First, Serena, in a silk blouse the color of meringue that expected applause. Then Trent Wren, smiling as if his teeth had signed NDAs. Behind them, 3 more attorneys, like matching luggage, 2 silent, 1 performing friendly. A busboy dimmed the lights. I asked him kindly to bring them back up. "We read better in daylight," I said. He laughed and obliged. The lemon mural on the wall turned from brooding to cheerful. "We appreciate your willingness to settle this amicably," Trent began, laying a folder on the table as if it were a newborn someone should coo at. I placed my binder beside it, tabs like small flags, and slid a sheet forward, the certified mail green card, freshly returned, signed by a neat Wren-adjacent hand. "Received," I said softly. "We'll keep our process steady." Elder wisdom. When people stack pressure on your shoulders, place your facts on the table. The weight shifts to where it belongs. A server poured water. I raised my glass. "To daylight," I said. "And to writing things, we mean." One lawyer blinked at my toast, as if to ask whose script I was reading from. Mine. Trent reached for the folder. "We've revised the agreement to reflect your concerns," he said. He slid pages toward me with a flourish that suggested magnanimity on sale. I scanned. The miner's clause wore softer socks but still had a steel toe. Appurtenances remained a hungry mouth. A new paragraph offered a temporary license to occupy my own cabin at the indulgence of the family council. My smile did not even wobble. "That's a theatrical word," I said. "Indulgence." I turned to Serena. "Do you prefer velvet curtains or practical sentences?" Light joke number 1. I asked if the family council came with ropes and a gavel, because I do look excellent in upholstery. But alas, the menu said nothing about judicial costumes. I slid my own packet across our cover letter, affidavit, certified copies, and the proposal for a courthouse mediator randomly assigned by the clerk. "If we're reconciling," I said, "let's use a neutral with a badge from the building where neutrals are made." The silent lawyers became slightly less silent in the way small dogs become wind chimes. Academic phrase of the day. Declaratory relief. The public argument that a court can resolve uncertainty by declaring the rights and obligations of parties without awarding damages. It's a way to turn fog into sentences, if pushed. I would ask for a declaration that the water shares and easements are mine to steward, and that no one can make my garden pretend it's theirs. Serena leaned forward, voice sugar-dusted. "Mira, we can provide a monthly allowance. We just need clarity on the property so we can plan the family business." She always says business, like it's a hymn. I let the word settle, then answered it with a small rock. "Clarity is exactly why we'll use the annex," I said. "Between now and then, no more draft agreements in restaurants, no more pens held like starters' pistols." Trent's smile developed hairline cracks. He gestured to the device in my hand. "No need to record among family." I nodded. "Which is why I'm glad we're not among only family," I replied, glancing at his entourage. I follow a daylight protocol. Recorder visible. Witnesses named. Copy stamped. It keeps everybody honest, including me. A knock at the private room's door. My first surprise arrived wearing sensible shoes. A court reporter, compact and serene, with a steno machine in a soft case. "You requested real-time transcription?" she asked. I did. In the email CC'd to everyone. The attorneys exchanged looks like players hearing a new rule mid-game. The reporter set up. Keys like a tiny organ. Her fingers hovering in chords. Sidebar, odd fact. Stenotype machines don't type letters one by one. They press chords that capture sounds. Building words like musical notes become measures. A skilled reporter can catch 225 words a minute. Turning talk into a topography you can walk again later. Music for the courthouse. Trent cleared his throat. This is highly irregular. The reporter smiled politely without moving her hands. "So our 5 attorneys at a family dinner," I said, tone quiet as napkins. "We're normalizing together." "Let's keep it simple," Serena said. She slid a signature page toward me. No body text, just lines and dates. "Just sign here to demonstrate good faith." I tapped the date in the corner. 2 weeks old, I murmured. Good faith doesn't arrive with yesterday's postmark. I placed the unsigned page in a transparent sleeve labeled Exhibit, Presented, Declined. Light joke number 2. I offered them a to-go box for any consent they couldn't finish today. "It reheats poorly," I added. "Best consume fresh, with context." One of the quiet lawyers tried a different door. "You've had financial difficulties in recent years. The allowance would ease that." He wore concern like a pressed shirt. I tucked my hands, palms down, on the table, a posture I learned from Maribel that means the chair will not move. "Water minutes are not alms," I said. "They are obligations. I keep time." Serena's smile gained edges. "You're being obstinate," she said. "Over dirt and pipes." I turned the big map photo toward her, the valley stitched with lines like a careful face. "Over agreements older than all of us," I said. "And a boy who deserves to watch tomatoes ripen in a summer he remembers fondly." The steno machine made a small music of our words. I placed surprise number 2 on the table. The co-op's roll excerpt with my name clean as morning. The 1129 tag photographed beside the meter notes. The certified copies of the bearer shares with green ink stamps hopping like frogs along the margins. "These aren't decorations," I said. "They're levers. We can use them gently, or we can consent to let a judge pull." There was a pause so intact you could have wrapped a gift in it. Then Trent tried a smile again. "Perhaps a brief caucus?" The lawyer stood and shuffled to the hallway, where they whispered as if secrets enjoy echo, through the glass. The sun laid rectangles on the carpet like tidy verdicts. I sipped water and counted to 60 for no reason other than it helps the metal in my bones relax. The server appeared with menus. I ordered soup because soup is Switzerland. When the lawyers returned, they were carrying a new word. "We accept a courthouse mediator," Trent said. "We'll withdraw tonight's draft and submit a new one through the annex. Progress. The kind where you hear one gear click into another." "Good," I said. "Then let's memorialize what we said." The court reporter read back the core points in that miraculous steady cadence. Neutral assignment. Track changes. No gag clauses masquerading as family unity. No appurtenances swallowing water rights. And all communications by email plus certified mail. The room felt briefly like a room where adults had met. We all looked slightly surprised. Light joke number 3. I asked if the annex offered a loyalty program, 10 honest sessions, and you get a free pen that refuses to sign anything unclear. No takers, but even the quiet lawyer almost smiled. As we packed, Serena tried one last ribbon. "You know, Theo loves coming to the big house," she said. "We're trying to make a life for him." I softened, because love is a lever too. "So am I," I said. which is why this proceeds in daylight. Tell him his frog is guarding important papers. The edge in her smile faltered, confusion or memory or both. We walked out together into the clean remainder of day. The court reporter gave me a thumb drive like a tiny treaty. I slipped it into a labeled sleeve. The sun slid down a notch but hadn't left. I felt tired the honest way, like fences feel after they hold. At the cabin, I filed the transcript under Annex Prep and wrote a brief summary email CCing the clerk. Who, what, where, which paragraphs died noble deaths. I added one line for the record. We concluded before dusk. It reads like a benediction. Before bed, I visited the ditch. The headgate handle turned without sulk. I logged the minute. The willow made its soft applause. Somewhere. A moth auditioned for the position of night supervisor and failed the don't fly into the lamp portion, but I appreciated the effort. Tomorrow, wait for the annex assignment, bake cookies for Miss Lark, set aside half a day to be exactly as boring as paperwork requires. We are not winning a movie. We are building a map where every turn is labeled and every valve turns without drama. That, I'm learning, is a kind of quiet victory you can sleep beside. The courthouse annex has ceilings that make everyone a little humbler. Fluorescent lights laid a pale lattice across the conference table, and the air smelled faintly of copier toner and old policy. I arrived with my binder. A plate of Miss Lark's cookies for the front desk, chain of custody for gratitude, and the calm that comes from deciding your voice will not lift unless a valve requires it. The mediator introduced himself as Mr. Hale, a man with the patience of a librarian and the wardrobe of a well-watered fern. We began with ground rules in his measured baritone. One person speaks at a time. We name our documents before we point to them. Nobody slides a signature page across the table like a dare. I placed my phone on the pad with the recorder icon visible. He nodded. Transparency helps people remember their best selves, he said, which is perhaps the kindest definition of record I've heard. Trent arrived with a slimmer folder than at dinner, already a small miracle. Serena followed, eyes bright, smile ironed. Two of the matching luggage attorneys stayed behind. Today's entourage was just one associate whose job, it seemed, was to look allergic to cookies. Mr. Hale invited a brief opening. Say what you hope to resolve. I went first, slower than my pulse wanted. I want clarity on title and use, I said, especially water shares, easements, and occupancy of my cabin, with a path that lets a boy keep counting summer tomatoes. Serena's statement tried to be velvet. We want unity and the best business decision for the family. The associate wrote, unity, in a rectangle like he was designing a logo. Elder wisdom. When someone answers with a theme, ask for a sentence. Themes are quilts. Sentences are stitches. The quilt only holds if the stitches do. Mr. Hale drew 2 columns on a legal pad, title use in one, unity, business in the other, and placed them side by side, as if to remind us that ideas deserve neighbors. We'll work through documents first, he said, then feelings. The fluorescent lights purred approval, which is their main hobby. I began with the ledger, document A, identifying it by date of creation, spanning 1972 to 2010. Contents, minutes, shares, valves, and the accompanying legend. Then the co-op roll excerpt, document B with my name printed where water remembers it. Then the bearer share certificates, document C showing transfers, endorsements, and those green frog stamps that make even paper smile. Finally, a photo of the Big Valley map with the 1129 tag, document D, plus a certified copy of the tracing sheet, document E. I slid each across one at a time, letting the small thumps be their own testimony. Trent lifted document C with careful fingers. We acknowledge these, he said. But we argue they are subordinate to our claim to fee simple title. He smiled like a teacher presenting a strong student. I nodded and drew a slow breath. Academic phrase of the day, quiet title. The public argument that when ownership or rights are cloudy. A court can declare who owns what or who gets to use what, so the land, the records, and the neighbors can all stop guessing. It's less thunder than housekeeping, a judge sweeping out cobweb arguments so the beams are visible. Mr. Hale underlined quiet title on his pad. We are not in court, he reminded us, but we can agree what would be declared if we were. I flipped to my notes. Our position is that the water rights and easements are appurtenant and separately documented, and that my occupancy is grounded in chain of title plus present stewardship of the system. The house without the water is a costume. The water without the house still knows where to go. Light joke number 1, I added. And as every tomato knows, a costume without plumbing is just a cape, which earned the barest smile from the associate, a citrus slice of humanity. Serena's jaw set. We're offering an allowance and asking her to vacate. We need flexibility for development. The word development tried to take up more chair than it paid for. I slid forward a thin stack labeled easement references. 2 old filings where ditches were granted right-of-way across neighboring parcels, each with those unglamorous meets and bounds. The ditches are sentences the land has been reading for decades, I said. Development must read aloud, not erase. Mr. Hale asked us to caucus separately for 10 minutes. In our smaller room, he said gently. What is non-negotiable? I pointed to 3 pebbles on his table, literally, because he used smooth stones as talking tokens. 1, the water shares and minutes. 2, the easement's integrity. 3, my right to remain at the cabin while we formalize paperwork. He nodded. What is flexible? How we structure apologies without turning them into weapons, I said, surprising myself. And timelines for formal recordings. He wrote, apologies without irony, out the window. A maintenance worker watered a planter with the seriousness of a minister. Sidebar, odd fact, fluorescent lights flicker at rates that most of us can't consciously see, often 100-120 hertz. But some animals and a few unlucky humans perceive the strobe. Courtrooms and annexes switch to electronic ballasts to reduce headaches. Today the lights felt steady, like a drum you can nap on. We returned to the main room. Mr. Hale invited proposals. Trent went first. Temporary license for 6 months, monthly stipend, relinquishment of water to the family entity for unified management. He said unified the way travel agents say all-inclusive. I stacked our stones. Counter, I remain, no license language. The co-op shares stay with me as recorded. We create a trust for Theo, funded by a percentage of net from any future sale of non-water assets. And we agreed to seek declaratory relief only if someone tries to smuggle appurtenances in through the kitchen door again. Light joke number 2. The kitchen door is for pie, I added. Legal theories must use the front entrance and wipe their feet. Serena bristled. You don't get to hold us hostage with a ditch. Mr. Hale's fern green tie didn't move, but his eyebrows did. I kept my voice like cool tea. A ditch is not a hostage taker. It's a calendar with water in it, I said. We can coordinate calendars. We cannot replace July. Trent conferred with the associate in a whisper shaped like an Excel sheet. He turned back. What about this? We recognize your present control of minutes and shares. You agree to reasonable transfers in drought seasons. Reasonable is a lovely word that needs a collar. Define reasonable with numbers, I said, and with the co-op schedule, and add this. All transfer requests must be in writing and logged with the clerk. No phone call emergencies that become permanent. Mr. Hale sketched a draft term sheet while we talked. We layered in small truths that add up. Daylight-only meetings. No non-disparagement clauses that gag affection. Track changes forever, amen. He suggested a mutual no retaliation clause. I agreed, with one exception. It cannot prohibit me from telling true stories to my grandson about beans and headgates. He wrote that down, word for word, his face a fountain with quiet water. Then came the hinge. I slid forward the tracing sheet, document E, showing the choreography of borrowed minutes. Maribel 5, Ruta 5, Garland 5, Return 5. This is how the Valley kept its promises, I said. If you want unified management, join the dance, don't buy the floor. I placed the small wood-handled received stamp on the table, a relic that somehow felt like a bell. Trent looked at the tracing, then at Serena. He was calculating leverage not in square footage, but in gallons and goodwill. The attorney's mouth did a little math. If the co-op disfavors us, he said slowly, the business plan is different. Mr. Hale nodded. Kindness untouched by triumph. Community is an asset class people forget to list, he said. We broke again. In caucus, Mr. Hale asked, what would make this livable? A written acknowledgement today that the water shares are mine to steward and cannot be pledged or reassigned, I said. A commitment to pursue any future changes only through the co-op's process, and an apology that names the extra napkins place card and the envelope at dusk. His eyes softened but stayed professional. You don't want humiliation. Just truth, I said. Humiliation peels paint. Truth holds beams. Back together. Trent read from his phone. We can acknowledge Ms. Mira's current recorded control of water shares and agree that any changes require co-op procedures. He glanced up. As to apologies, perhaps. Serena cut in, voice tight. Fine, I'm sorry about the place card, she said, words like marbles. And about the letter, we were trying to... She stopped. The fluorescent lights hummed. To make it easy, I finished gently, and she let out a sound that might have been the first honest exhale of the day. Mr. Hale turned his pad so we could both read. The term sheet, in his neat printing, looked like a future without knives. Water shares acknowledged, easements respected, occupancy continued, co-op process supreme, mediator to draft a memorandum of understanding for signatures tomorrow at noon, any court filing limited to a quiet title action if needed, with a joint request for declaratory relief on water if anyone gets fancy later. Light joke number 3. I asked whether the annex offered a stamp that says, no fancy, and Mr. Hale promised to petition the stationery budget. We initialed each paragraph, not as surrender, but as breadcrumbs. The associate, who had refused cookies out of principle, finally took one and looked surprised that paperwork could contain chocolate. We scheduled tomorrow's noon signing in daylight, of course. Mr. Hale closed with a sentence that felt like a porch light. You have made order in a place that rewards order. Outside, the sky was an honest blue you only get after fluorescent. I walked to the clerk's office and filed the term sheet, time-stamped like a heartbeat. Miss Lark winked and added a frog clip. Back at the cabin, I logged minutes at the head gate, then sat on the steps with tea cooling into grace. The valley ticked softly. Somewhere. Theo's bedtime approached the way starlight approaches, slow, then suddenly everywhere. Tomorrow at noon, pens will move, but not because anyone shoved them, because we lined the page with sentences that can hold. Dawn came early and wrong, before the first sparrow tested its syllables. A smell found me, acrid and raw, like pennies melted on a stove. I was halfway to the door before my mind named it, smoke. The porch light, on a motion sensor, blinked awake with a nervous pulse. Through the window, I saw a lick of orange nosing the welcome mat, exploratory as a raccoon and twice as rude. I'd set the sprinklers last night on a timer. Not for heroics, but for thirsty geraniums. Elder wisdom. Prepare for the small things and sometimes the big things. Trip over them. At 4:59, the timer clicked like a polite metronome, and the yard answered with a chorus of water. The porch edge went from ember to sizzle. One stubborn corner hissed an argument, but the spray was insistent. I called 911 with my voice in its low gear. The one that knows how to spell addresses without getting clever. I stepped outside with the small extinguisher Leon kept by the door, foam snoring out like a tired dragon. The mat gave up. A patch of siding thumb-smudged black. The wood rail wore a cradle of ash. I walked the beam with the sprayer until it turned from steam to chill. The head gate down the line gave a sympathetic thunk. The system's way of clearing its throat. Light joke number 1. I told the porch we're retiring matches as a decor choice. It offered no dissent. Charcoal seldom does. The sheriff's cruiser arrived on the tail of the volunteer engine. Lights painting the pines with borrowed sunrise. The fire crew checked the crawl space and the eaves with calm, practiced hands. The sheriff, a compact woman named Ortiz, took statements in a voice tuned for long nights. "Any cameras?" she asked, and I pointed to the trail cam Maribel had mounted on the fence last month for hummingbirds. Which was accurate if you count people who hum before they do something foolish. She nodded, appreciative of neighbors who believe in eyes that sleep with one lid open. We pulled the SD card carefully, chain of custody in miniature. I gloved up because Maribel would tease me if I didn't. Slid the card into a labeled envelope, then into a sandwich bag because life is nothing if not a sequence of Ziplocs. Sheriff Ortiz watched with the faint smile of a fellow traveler on the road of paperwork. We replayed the footage on her dashboard tablet. At 4:41, a figure shuffled in, hood tight, a canister in one hand, a lighter in the other. Such competence as you'd expect from a person who thinks dawn is a cloak. The flame caught, foot scuffed, mat smoldered. Then, at 4:59, the sprinklers woke, punctual as librarians, and the figure leapt back in a two-step of surprise that would have earned a ribbon at a county fair. They slipped on their own malice, caught the railing, then fled into the pines. The camera caught a partial plate when a car reversed too fast. It wasn't elegant, but numbers glinted like fish. Academic phrase of the day. Spoliation of evidence. The public argument that when someone destroys, alters, or fails to preserve evidence they had a duty to keep. Courts can draw an inference that the evidence would have been unfavorable to them. In plain terms, if you stomp on the truth. The judge notices your muddy shoes. Ortiz bagged a spent matchbook, photographed the scorch, and asked if I'd had any disputes lately. "We're on our way to a mediated memorandum today," I said. "So technically, the dispute is obeying traffic laws." She wrote that down without editorial. She asked about enemies. I said I preferred the term people temporarily confused about process. She wrote that too. A corner of her mouth doing one small sit-up. Sidebar, odd fact. Modern smoke alarms don't actually smell smoke. Most detect tiny particles by measuring changes in an electric field, ionization alarms, or by beaming light through a little chamber and watching for scatter. Mine had sulked last year after a toast incident, and I'd promised it better bread. Today it behaved like a champion soprano, hit the note, held it, took a bow. When the crews left, I made tea because adrenaline is loud, and tea is a librarian with a good shush. I photographed everything again in the honest light, the rail, the siding, the wet constellation on the porch boards, and emailed the images to myself, the clerk, and Mr. Hale. Incident early morning, I wrote, time-stamped, concise. I attached the sheriff's incident number like a button you don't want to lose. Maribel called from her porch, voice steady. "I saw the lights," she said. I gave her the boiled down version. Timer, hiss, trail cam, partial plate. Daylight is already on your side, she murmured. We'll keep it there. By 8. The pine smelled like a campfire you didn't order. I wiped ash off the potato paperweight as if it had personally been in harm's way. The received stamp sat by the ledger like an old friend who heard a bang and came to sit on the couch. Light joke number 2. I put the singed welcome mat in a contractor bag and labeled it Retired Greeter. Because even evidence deserves a dignified exit. I called Theo to tell him I might smell like a barbecue for a day. Will the frogs be okay? He asked. They're in charge, I said, tapping the little green clip. They issued a memo. He laughed. The sound washed the ash out of my throat. At 10, Sheriff Ortiz called back. Partial plate hits a vehicle registered to a landscaping company, she said, naming a firm that had done work at Serena's big house last month. Could be coincidence. Could be a contractor moonlighting poorly. We're following up. I thanked her without adjectives. Facts wear better without them. I walked the ditch before heading to the annex, just to hear the system hum its vowels. The willow dripped last night's small heroics. The headgate handle turned with cooperative memory. I logged the minute, noted the pressure, and reminded the metal we had an appointment with formality at noon. The annex felt cooler than the day deserved, like a shady porch you'd trust with secrets. Mr. Hale had our term sheet typed into a clean memorandum, the kind of paper that thinks highly of verbs. Serena arrived with Trent, both looking like people who'd slept close to a phone. Mr. Hale began with the ordinary kindness that saves worlds. Before we sign, is everyone safe? I said yes. Serena hesitated, then said yes, and her voice remembered its human settings. Trent nodded, eyes already on the paragraphs. We reviewed the language line by line. The clause acknowledging my stewardship of water shares stayed intact. The easement preservation stood like a good fence. The occupancy provision described my cabin as home without qualifiers. We added a paragraph about no unilateral alterations to irrigation infrastructure, inserted after my morning email. Couched in neutral words but wearing the sheriff's incident number in the footnote like a small badge. Agreed, Trent said, the word arriving like a reluctant coin. Serena signed, mouth a thin line, but she didn't flinch. I signed last, not for drama, but because my hand wanted to see everyone else commit. Mr. Hale countersigned, then placed each copy under the annex seal. The stamp pressed down with a sigh that felt like a room exhaling. Light joke number 3. I told Mr. Hale the seal noise should be available as a ringtone for anxious people. We could all use a little thump of official calm, I said. He grinned like a fern that just got misted. We traded copies, my binder swallowing mine with satisfaction. Mr. Hale read a closing sentence that sounded like a blessing from an accountant. This memorandum reflects the parties' present agreement and their intention to formalize within 30 days. In the interim, they will act in good faith and paper accordingly. Paper accordingly, a phrase so modest it could hold up a roof. Outside, the sun had moved from proof to promise. I walked to the clerk's office where Miss Lark took our signed memo, stamped it, frog clipped it, and slid a receipt across. Heard about your sprinkle defense, she said, eyes twinkling. Budget conscious and dramatic, my two favorite genres. Back at the cabin, I swept the porch gently, gathering brittle halos of ash into a dustpan and lowering them into a metal bucket. I set the bucket on dirt, because embers like to play dead. The siding wore a bruise, but nothing structural. I ran a hand along the rail, rough, warm, stubborn. It felt like a bone healing after a small fracture, tender, but pointed in the right direction. I wrote the day's list with the tidy pleasure of someone threading beads. Send thank you email to Mr. Hale, deliver copy to Sheriff Ortiz, order new smoke alarm to replace the sulky one. Buy a welcome mat that says paperwork lives here. I added one more. Check sprinklers. Buy extra hose. Preparedness is not paranoia. It's hospitality for tomorrow. Evening drifted through the willow as if the tree had decided to share. I sat on the steps with tea and listened to a world that had flirted with chaos and chosen instead to be boring. Boring, I'm learning, is a hymn with no chorus but a wonderful bridge. Tomorrow, draft the longer settlement documents. Schedule a co-op meeting to update roles. Call the insurance agent who speaks fluent deductibles. Bring a pie to Maribel because gratitude, like water, travels best when you keep it moving. And maybe, if I have time, plant the moon and stars watermelon seeds. Because a porch that has known heat deserves a constellation it can eat. The day after the memorandum. The cabin felt like a violin after the bow lifts, still vibrating, but quiet. I brewed chamomile and sat with a legal pad, the color of patience. Today was for terms that could stand on their own legs, boundaries that didn't need a chaperone, and a path for second chances that didn't pretend the first harm never happened. I began by drafting the trust for Theo, not the kind that shouts with billboards, but the modest architecture of security, a percentage from any future sale of non-water assets. Distributions tied to milestones, education, a first toolbox, a passport renewal, sprinkled with a clause that funds can also buy seeds, books, and sneakers for running toward joy, I wrote. Stewardship, not spectacle. Then underlined it twice. The way Leon used to underline where fence posts should go, so nobody dug where the thistle wanted to live. At 9. The phone hummed with an email from Trent, a proposed schedule for formal recordings and a first draft of guardrails, communication rules, co-op update procedures, a calendar for maintenance windows. The tone had shifted from brass to woodwind. He even used please. I added it to the binder under a new tab, civility. It looked good there, like a rescued chair finally back at the table. Academic phrase of the day, restorative practices, the public argument that after harm, communities can focus not only on rules broken, but on relationships repaired, asking who was hurt, what they need, and who is responsible for meeting that need. Not a courtroom replacement, but a set of chairs in a circle that says, we will not pretend this didn't happen, and we will not let it run our future. I called Maribel to read her the draft out loud, because words behave better after they've been asked to pass through a throat. She suggested a few edits. Replace best efforts with a measurable verb. Add a 72-hour notice requirement for any request to alter flow. Specify that apologies are for naming harm, not for purchasing silence. She paused. And give the trust a sentence about Theo's agency. A boy should know the gift isn't a leash. Elder wisdom. Boundaries that work are built like good gates, easy to see, easy to use, and hard to jump when you're in a mood. By late morning, Serena texted, brief, formal. Could we meet briefly with Theo at the cabin around 4? He wants to see the frogs. I stared at the screen and felt the floor tilt a hair. Then I breathed. Terms and boundaries exist to make yes safe. 4, on the porch, I replied. Daylight, short visit, no documents. She sent a thumbs up I decided to interpret as a handshake with mittens. I printed the trust draft and walked it to the clerk for a preliminary look. Miss Lark peered over her glasses with amphibian gravity. Good bones, she said, echoing Maribel. Add a successor trustee. Even frogs take vacations. Light joke number 1. I promised to name the successor Deputy Tadpole, and she nearly smudged her green ink laughing. Back home, I set 2 cups on the porch and a small bowl of apple slices. Hospitality is a fence you build from the inside. The rail still wore its smoke bruise. Now the color of a storm deciding not to happen. At 4 on the dot. A car pulled in. Serena stepped out first, face careful. Theo tumbled after, all knees and questions. "Frogs on duty," I said, tapping the little green clip at the corner of my binder. He grinned and leaned into me in the loose. Honest way children lean when they remember you are a place to rest. Serena hovered, then sat. "We're formalizing the trust," I said, plain. "It's for this kid's future." She nodded, a movement so small it might have been a leaf agreeing with a breeze. Theo wanted a tour. So we walked to the willow. He counted sprinkler heads as if they were constellations. "This one's Orion," he declared, and I did not correct his cosmology because why would I steal a sky from a boy who's building one? He asked about the singed rail. I told the truth. Made short, someone made a poor choice. The sprinklers made a better one, and we learned to check the timer twice. Serena listened, eyes on the ground. As if words cast shadows, she was trying to understand. Sidebar, odd fact, willow bark contains salicin, a compound that the body converts to salicylic acid, cousin to the active ingredient in aspirin. Folks long ago chewed strips for headaches. I don't recommend chewing railings, but it's nice to know the tree at the ditch has a minor in comfort. We returned to the porch. Serena cleared her throat. "I owe you a proper apology," she said, voice thinner than I remembered. "For the place card, for the letter, for trying to make you small so our plans could feel big." She didn't add "but," which is the only way an apology counts as a sentence instead of a sales pitch. I let the quiet hold it for a beat, then said, "Thank you. I do not forgive on demand, but I can name a true thing when it comes in the door without a mask." Theo asked if he could water the geraniums. I handed him the hose, showed him the valve, taught him the count to 60 that metal understands. He took it seriously, which is the first sign of a person who might grow a garden and a conscience at the same time. We kept the visit short because endings matter as much as beginnings. At 4:40, I said, 2 more minutes, then it's frog bedtime. Light joke number 2. Theo solemnly promised to read the frogs a story about a tadpole who becomes a lawyer and only represents pawns. After they left. The porch felt both bigger and less echoing. I sat with the trust draft again, adding the successor trustee, adding Serena's apology to the record, not to weaponize it, but to keep the future honest about the day a sentence was said that needed to be said. I emailed the revised draft to Trent and CC'd Mr. Hale and the clerk. Subject line, Trust V2, Theo's future, numbers, not thunder. Trent replied quickly, understood, incorporating. The pace had changed from chase to choreography. He proposed that we sign the trust and a boundary protocol on Saturday morning at the annex. Witnesses present. Cookies optional. Cookies should never be optional. But I appreciated the evolution. I made another list. Schedule the co-op meeting to update roles with the easement paragraph stapled on top. Draft a no surprises pact for family gatherings, no place cards that jab, no ambush announcements, a 2-minute cool-off rule, and plan a late summer workday to oil valves and share tomato sandwiches with anyone who shows up with a wrench or a story. Light joke number 3. I penciled, buy a doorbell that says no soliciting, including drama. And imagine the first solicitor blinking at it like a cat reading Latin. As the light thinned, I walked the line one more time. The headgate handle turned with the pleased memory of a habit kept. I logged the minute. The willow whispered its aspirin wisdom. Back inside. I washed 2 cups in a bowl sticky with apple and felt the odd relief of ordinary dishes. The binder on the table looked less like armor today and more like a family recipe box. Measuring, preserving, passing along. I wrote a final paragraph for the day's page. Sentences that could serve as a small North Star. We are not trying to win against each other. We are trying to hold the shape of the valley in our hands and teach a boy how water moves. We will disagree, we will measure, we will write things down. We will invite daylight as if it were a person worthy of a chair. Tomorrow. We draft the last set of filings, oil the stubborn valve by the east fence, and, if time cooperates, press the moon and star seeds into the damp soil by the porch step. There is a second chance embedded in every germinating thing. Not because the first sentence was wrong, but because the story isn't finished yet. We are, at last. Writing it slowly enough to hear ourselves think. Saturday tasted like apples and paper. We signed the trust at the annex, Theo's name steady, my hand steady. Serena's hand steadier than I expected. Mr. Hale presided with his fern tie and that voice that files rough edges. The annex seal thunked 3 times. Trust, boundary protocol, co-op update request, and each thump tucked the future in like a blanket. We thanked him. We thanked the clerk. We thanked the copier for behaving. Boring, glorious boring. Back at the cabin, a small congregation gathered. Maribel with a tin of lemon bars. Miss Lark carrying a folder and a frog clip like a valedictorian. Nix from the co-op with a wrench that had seen decades. And Theo wearing a face that read assistant in giant invisible letters. Serena stood on the porch rail's unburned side, hands folded, trying on quiet the way people try on hats, hopeful, uncertain. We made a circle that wasn't ceremonial so much as useful. It's how you stand when you're about to do a day's work and call it community. We walked the ditch line together, because signatures are theory and valves are practice. I showed them the willow, the elbow where pressure likes to hesitate, the head gate handle that turns best if you count to 60 and use both patience and wrist. Theo, promoted to valve captain, narrated his count with the seriousness of a lighthouse. Serena listened without arranging the moment for an audience, which is its own kind of progress. Nix checked pressure, scribbled numbers, declared the system sound enough to sing. It did, quietly, B-flat like a secret hymn. Academic phrase of the day, constructive notice, the public argument that once a document is properly recorded. The world is treated as if it knows, even if no one knocks on your door to tell you. We had just handed the world its lesson. Water shares stewarded here, easements respected here. A cabin occupied with keys that fit here. Elder wisdom. Give your keys to people who check the stove, not to people who rearrange your table while you're still eating. Trust lives or dies at the hinges. I had 3 keys on a loop, 1 spare for Maribel, who understands both mercy and locks, 1 for Nix, emergency use only, to hush a pipe if it decides to shout, and 1 on a cord for Theo, a porch key. Not to the big door yet, but to the small chest under the bench that holds oil, a flashlight, the meter log, and a roll of flagging tape that turns paths into sentences. I knelt so our eyes made an honest line and slipped the cord over his head. "This is a key to help," I said. He nodded as if I'd knighted him with a garden trowel. Light joke number 1. He asked if the key could open snacks. I told him it opens apples when accompanied by patience, which he decided was a fair exchange. We set the new welcome mat. Paperwork lives here, and laughed in the soft way you laugh when a bruise stops being the first thing you notice. Then we planted. Moon and stars. Watermelons went into a bed sketched by flagging tape and hope. Theo pressed each seed with a fingertip like a tiny pledge. Serena asked if spacing mattered. I said the plants prefer personal space, and so do neighbors. She smiled, small and true. We watered to account that valves appreciate. The willow revised the light with its green handwriting. Sidebar. Odd fact. Watermelon leaves exhale tiny amounts of isoprene that can scent the air on hot days. Some researchers think it helps the plant manage heat stress. A garden has its own chemistry set, constantly mixing survival with perfume. By late afternoon, Miss Lark had filed our memorandum and emailed the record numbers. "You now have constructive notice, literal notice, and cookies," she said. "I recommend all 3 whenever possible." Maribel made tea that tasted faintly of childhood agreements. We sat on the steps and let the day settle. Nix told a story about a winter the ditch froze in scallops and how patience and hammers conspired to persuade it back into motion. Everyone laughed at the part where the hammer slid into the water and had to be fished out with a rake and an argument. I wrote our next precise things on a yellow card: install a better porch light, schedule fall maintenance day, memorize the co-op roster's birthdays for the purpose of pie. Serena read the list. "I can bring pie," she said, cautious. "We'll put you on the rotation," I answered, not unkindly. That was enough for the afternoon. Light joke number 2. The moth from the other night resumed its campaign for town clerk. It failed the "don't hit the glass" section again, but aced persistent attendance, which, to be fair, is half the job. Evening leaned in. Theo and I checked the timer that had made my accidental heroics possible. We set a second program named No Drama, because labels are tiny spells. I taught him how to log minutes, how to note weather, how to tape a copy of anything important to the inside of the cabinet door, because cabinets have excellent memories. Serena watched, hands in her pockets. And when Theo asked why we wrote everything down, she answered before I could. "So we don't make the same mistake twice and call it fate." The sentence sat on the rail like a visitor we wanted to stay. We walked Serena and Theo to the car. She hesitated, then said, "I'll see you at the co-op meeting." Not a threat, a plan. Theo blew a kiss to the frogs. The car went down the road like a sentence that has learned to end with a period instead of an exclamation mark. When quiet returned, I oiled the headgate handle one last time. A bedtime story for metal. The ledger and the received stamp waited on the table like old friends who know when to talk and when to simply be. I slipped the last signed copy of the trust behind the potato paperweight, wrote today's date in the log, and added one more line. Harvest will be in its own time. Today we planted. Light joke number 3. I told the porch we were entering a long-term relationship with uneventfulness. It did not protest. And even the siding's bruise seemed to approve. Night came without a test. The pines lifted a quiet like a lullaby. I turned off the porch light, left the fan to hum, and listened to a system that used to scare me start to sound like a choir I could sing with. Not loud, just tuned. The day begins with papers that behave, with signatures that don't tremble, with a seal that presses down like a gentle, official hand. We stand in a small circle, neighbors, clerks, a co-op manager, a mother who is learning how to apologize without ribbon, and we walk the ditch line because agreements on paper ask to be walked with feet. A boy counts to 60 while a valve remembers its job. The willow makes shade in sentences. Water hums B flat. The headgate swings in its own rhythm, not hurried, not slow, exactly itself. We hand out keys with care, one to a neighbor who listens, one to the co-op that keeps time, one to the child who will learn the names of tools and the feeling of trust around his neck. We set a welcome mat that replaces the burned one. We plant moon and stars in a bed measured by tape and hope. And we water with a count that turns patience into a habit. We log minutes, file receipts, affix frog green clips, and let cookies be part of the chain of custody. We rename danger into protocol, apology into breath, family into a calendar where everyone knows the days. We learn that constructive notice is just a phrase for telling the world a truth so clearly the world has no excuse to forget. We discover that quiet victories are a kind of music, a porch that does not smoke, a gate that turns, a child who trusts the count. And then, with the sun folding itself into the pines and the cabin breathing like a grateful animal, we let the ledger rest, the stamp sit, the night air move. The long work is not finished, but it has found its pace, steady, written down, shared. We turn off the light, let a fan hum, and settle into the safety of ordinary breath.